Here we are in northeast Minneapolis at Eat My Words bookstore, and I have the pleasure of serving the northeast community just up the street at the Northeast Library, and the supervisor there at the Northeast Library. I've worked with Hennepin County Library for many years in a number of different roles, so maybe I can talk about some of that. But going back, how did I get here? I was born in Minnesota and grew up out west of the Twin Cities. When I was very young, we lived out in Excelsior, where I was born. At that time, it was very much a rural community, and spent most of my days just running around outside and chasing fireflies. And then, let's see, around my 5th grade year, my parents separated and divorced, and I moved with my mother to Chaska, Minnesota, and spent the rest of my middle school and high school years there. I think the story of my life might make more sense in reverse, but grew up out there, and then I think I want to say how I got into librarianship. Leading up to that, I went to high school in Chaska, Minnesota. I think I was very much like any young person, trying to find a way to tell the story of how I do what I do. Let me just say I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a librarian, I'm a musician, I'm a skeptic, I'm a humanist, and so I think I am many things, and I think I do a number of things. But what I do professionally, I do because I care about the free exchange of ideas and equitable access for all. And so that's one of the things that drew me to libraries. In high school, I was raised in kind of an evangelical household. And I think in high school I started thinking more skeptically, and started to ask some questions, and began to read a lot of philosophy and some other things that spurred some interests that I followed into college. I went to college at the University of Minnesota, and I had always had a strong interest in music. In high school, I was in bands and made music with others, and during college I was part of a number of rock bands, and we published and toured the U.S., and I did that for many years, and that was quite a awesome adventure to see the country and to make a joyful noise with others, and to share that at nightclubs around the country. I got to meet some heroes and play with some other great musicians. And then when I got off the road and back to Minnesota, thought about what I wanted to do from there. I had a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and a strong interest in, a free exchange of ideas, and thought about how I could leverage those into a career. So, long story short, I then pursued a position with the Minneapolis Public Library. Worked up in North Minneapolis for many years, and that's when I really saw some of the opportunities that were available there. Saw a lot of young people that came to the library. That library was so well used, but I saw young people that really didn't have a lot of opportunities after school or otherwise, and that really got me started thinking about how I could engage them in learning after school. being a musician and interest in art and making things with our hands and with technology. I started a youth employment and technology program up there called the Teen Tech Squad, and they led workshops for other youth, giving them opportunities to make things with technology and to learn in the context of making things that they care about. Then that led to various other things, and I then went to Minneapolis Central Library and was the Teen Central librarian, working with young adults and teens there, and wanted to do more of that. So I implemented a program along with some grant-funded support. We knocked down some walls, literally, to build a teen tech center, which is kind of a makerspace down at Minneapolis Central Library, a place where young people can make things with technology and learn in the process. So we created a recording studio and a video editing space and tools for kids to learn how to code and to design things, all with an eye to really providing some equitable access to opportunities to learn and grow and to find a passion that would help them with their lives in the future. So I feel like I'm meandering. I'm trying to explain why I do or how I came to do what I do. When my daughter was born, one of the best days of my life, that certainly changed quite a few things and changed my perspective and some of my priorities. And while I still make music for fun and still get together with friends sometimes to play music, my days on the road doing that sort of thing, I don't feel called to, drawn to do that any longer. I'm still a huge appreciator of music, and but anyway, so being a parent is certainly something I do happily, and then what I do professionally is try to provide access and learning opportunities and promote literacy and learning in the community. It's within the library. It's certainly a team effort, and it's the sort of thing that we do together. I like to say with our staff, none of us know everything, but together we know a lot, and I feel like that's true of the community as a whole. I've been up here in Northeast since last summer, but I lived up here in Northeast for many years when I was a student at the University of Minnesota. I remember first coming to Northeast Minneapolis as a teenager when we would come up to Mayslack's meets. They would have a poetry slam, and so me and some friends would come up and go to those poetry slams at Mayslack's when I was probably in my junior year of high school, and moved to this neighborhood when I started in college at the University of Minnesota. So that I don't know if that answers the question of how I came to do what I do, but that's a little bit of a background leading up to where I'm sitting today.
Yeah. So, was it a hard thing for you to become a humanist and a skeptic, given your background? Was it a hard move?
Well, that's a good question. I think I probably brought that up because that was an important part of my childhood and also just part of what drove me to be interested in the sorts of things I'm interested in. I think, being raised in a loving household, but by a family that had strongly held beliefs that I also held, and then began to question and thinking about sort of the diversity of beliefs and seeing sort of contradictions, and if this was true, then does that mean this is false, and can they both be true? And so that certainly got me thinking, and I think I probably did struggle in the time when I was questioning some of those deeply held ideas or commitments. But I think that's also what spurred me to want to think more deeply about where to go from there. So I remember, for example, I had a great teacher in high school that taught a class called History and Mythology. And I think I was tinkering with reading early, and before I really understood the greats in philosophy. I was reading things like Richard Bach and Ayn Rand and other nonsense when I was thinking about these things, and then was reading Zen sermons and a variety of things. Well, that class, I remember we went to see Voltaire's Candide, or I should say the production of it at the Guthrie Theater, Bernstein's Candide. And that was an eye-opener for me. I mean, it was hilarious, and just the ideas in there were really a lot in line with what I was thinking or feeling at that time. So I guess that was it. It was difficult, and but it also spurred me to dig deeper into multiple perspectives and other ideas, and to maybe question some of my assumptions, and to begin to think about some of the things that still puzzle me and inspire me today.
It's always great to meet a fellow philosophy major. Though it's odd, having done it myself, I still have the impulse to ask, why would you major in that? And the fact that somebody that I did it doesn't sort of eliminate that question. Has your philosophy major stood you in good stead? Has it been, do you ever, I sometimes wish I'd gone either mathematics or theater instead of philosophy, either one or the other, How do you end up feeling about that?
Yeah, I never regret studying philosophy. In fact, I'm still very, very interested in the subject, and although I read a lot of other things, especially to try to be a good reader's advisor in the library, truth be told, in my free time when I have it, I will usually lean toward reading philosophy, and I think it's helped me in a lot of ways. Just, I think, being a critical thinker, and I think gave me a broad base that served me well in my life, but also in my career. And so as a librarian, I think it's given me a good foundation to think critically, to sort of think about perspectives and the way that we can sort of surround the truth, or if someone's trying to understand a subject, understand the importance of multiple sources and evidence and validity and logic, and all those things come into play. But I think also just an appreciation for other cultures and other points of view, and I like to think that makes me a better librarian and maybe a better citizen too. So no, I never regret it, although I will say I did at one point entertain the idea of graduate studies in philosophy, and I went to the then director of undergraduate studies to just ask for her advice, and I thought she gave me great advice. She said, well, Aaron, if you can't imagine yourself doing anything else, then you should do that. And so I thought about that for quite a while. Can I imagine myself doing anything else? And I guess I could. So I chose not to pursue a graduate degree in philosophy, and I don't regret that decision either. Then also the music and the road called, and I had the opportunity to jump on a tour bus and see the country and play music and do that. And I think that was an amazing experience that I'm really grateful for too. So like I say, then I came back and thought about how to take that and put that, at least to some degree, to service to others. And so I think the philosophy degree has been valuable in that way. Probably messed me up a little bit too. Yeah.
Yeah. You have taken on this problem, which it makes some of our heads hurt just to think of, the problem of addressing the library needs of youth and making the connection, between books and teenagers, between the technology and teenagers. The more I know about that, the more I think that's a really hard one. But maybe from the inside it doesn't seem hard. But I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about the challenges of working with young adults and making bridges between them and the library and books and the last generations and all that sort of stuff.
Well, yeah, I think I got started thinking about that just working with young people in North Minneapolis, and while the library had a lot to offer them, I saw us missing opportunities to engage young people, and it was a place that the kids would come every day after school, and it still is a valuable asset to the community. But I guess when I step back and say, I've been thinking for a long time about literacy in the 21st century is a lot more than just reading books and writing, and that there are lots of other modes of expression, whether we're talking about music or graphic design or coding, for instance, and being able to express oneself and to communicate ideas in multiple modes, and then also just the importance of having some facility with technology to be successful these days. I saw the kids that I was working with not having enough opportunities to experience that, to be introduced to it, just a chance to tinker with some of these tools. And I think it's an equity and social justice issue. Being able to, thinking back to my childhood for a moment, my mom did not have a lot, but she saved up to buy me an Apple IIc. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I had been goofing around at school learning basic programming in BASIC, and that was an inspiration for me. And I spent countless hours just coding in BASIC. This was before the internet or anything, and So my mom saved up to buy me an Apple IIc, and that was like the greatest thing ever. And I really got inspired in thinking about computer programming and thinking about things I still think about, just robots and artificial intelligence and all that. Well, how do kids that don't have those kinds of opportunities even begin to think about, oh, I could be an engineer, or I could be a computer programmer, or I could be a graphic designer, or without opportunities to try it. So eventually, when we got to the Teen Tech Center, that was one of my hopes for that space, is that it would be a welcoming space where young people could hang out and then begin to mess around with these tools, and then hopefully start to geek out with these tools without the kind of formal structure of school that sometimes is a turnoff, especially to kids that may already be disengaged from traditional school approaches. So I certainly never thought of myself as someone who was trying to save these kids, but I saw kids that with just as much potential as any, that were kind of just kicking it on the corner. And how do you get them interested in something that may spark an interest that leads to a real future for them? And for a lot of young people, music or video or comics or animation is a great hook into sort of design thinking and just I think sparking an interest that could lead to some self-motivation to really go where they want to go. So yeah, I think it was just seeing how the library was a place already that had some purchase with the kids, and that they're here, we have an opportunity to help them go further. So we started doing some real simple things like doing after-school workshops, making animation with a program called Scratch. And I got introduced to that about 10 years ago from a colleague. And that's been exciting too, because I was able to both, I think, help young people get interested in coding and animation and other things. And I too was able to do some great things that were goals of mine. I was always fascinated with the MIT Media Lab, and Scratch was developed at the MIT Media Lab, and with the work I was doing at the Tech Center, got connected with the Clubhouse Network and MIT Media Lab. I got a chance to visit out there a couple times and see their robotics lab, and got to see all kinds of amazing things that the engineers there at MIT Media Lab were working on. And I sort of looked at the way that they were working with one another, and tried to model some of what we were doing at the Tech Center after that. So we brought in adults from the community that had experience in working in technology or in performing arts or in media as mentors to work with the kids. And so they would be able to come in and talk with the kids about the work they do, but also to sit down with them and work with them on their projects and serve in kind of a mentoring capacity that I think both helped spark the kids' interest, but also helped them start to build a network that could help them figure out, how do I do that? I never knew that you could be a video editor, or I never knew that you could be a web designer or whatever. How does one go about doing that? Especially for kids that may fall through the cracks otherwise. It's been really rewarding to see. Well, now some of them are older, and I'm seeing where they're going, and that's been a really rewarding thing. I guess I kind of meandered there, but yeah. So I have learned a lot from working with the kids. I think they have learned some things through the opportunities that they've been given there. And yeah, so anyway, I made a recent move into management, and I'm really enjoying supporting a team at the Northeast Library. And although we don't have a teen tech center or a place like that within the Northeast Library, there are opportunities like that around the city. And I'm just excited to see that kind of a model or approach popping up in other environments. So this kind of approach, connected learning or hands-on learning, I'm seeing in other libraries now, and not just at the Science Museum of Minnesota, which is a place I love. I think we need more places like that within the community that are safe places, that have equitable access, place where young people can go to explore their interests and to learn by doing stuff.
Well, thinking about it, I mean, if you read Bill Gates's kind of memoir, the account of him, you have a picture that he was the first person possibly on Earth who had unlimited computer access.
Yeah.
Through a kind of a spooky thing. When everybody else was being charged, $1 billion a minute to work with these things, he just kind of snuck in a corner, little place nobody knew about, and typed away.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else kind of followed from that. Well,
right, yeah.
do you think, I mean, my problem is I haven't been able to figure out how kids could get enough access to get more than a taste. I mean, this business of geeking out, which is the point at which something gets established for a kid, and it isn't just looking over the fence at what you might be, but you can see yourself actually becoming an animator or becoming a programmer or making a new kind of robot or whatever. How well is the library positioned to supply significant technological access to young people?
That's a great question. I think, getting to the geek out end of the spectrum is not easy, but my hope is that through opportunities or just exposure, at least a spark can happen, and then the library I see as a connector that can help connect someone with a broader range of opportunities, whether that's in the library or within our community. So the library, I think, does a really good job of providing broad access for the whole community, internet access, for instance, and that's an equity issue too. But as far as robust tools for multimedia production and that sort of thing, that is not something we're not there yet. But we have created some spaces within the library system that have both the tools and the support to go deeper in those areas. So for instance, the Teen Tech Center or at Minneapolis Central or the Brooklyn Park Library, they recently built a new building up in Brooklyn Park that has a great STEM space. That's one part of what the library has to offer, of course, and maybe it's because I'm passionate about that we're talking especially about that. But I think the library provides an array of services and resources, and technology is an important one. For kids, a lot of times what they're coming to the library for is to get online and to interact with their friends, online, and to do what a lot of us do on the internet, to explore. But then obviously we offer homework help resources and resources for them for their school projects or for their reading for entertainment. But then this effort to engage young people in kind of a makerspace environment is something that libraries are just beginning to explore. And where I think spaces like Leonardo's basement or the Science Museum have been doing that kind of work for a long time. That's something that's still relatively new to libraries. It's still kind of on the cutting edge of library work. I think it makes a lot of sense because libraries are important to communities and they're a place that welcome everyone, and you don't need to have a certain amount of dollars for membership, and again, that access thing like you were talking about with Bill Gates. I have respect for Mr. Gates, but you're right. I think his ability to get onto a mainframe and to have those 10,000 hours of experience as a young person, certainly not coincidence that he was so successful in technology later in life, or even early in life. So I would say that that's something we're moving toward, and I think that while the library still is about books, we're about a lot more than books, and that literacy in the 21st century includes a lot more than just print, and that's something that I think will continue to come clearer, I think, in libraries. Yeah.
During the time when I was in classrooms in pretty poor communities, I got straight that some of the kids I was talking to were just absurdly talented.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you got straight how much talent there was, you just giggled. I mean, they were unbelievable kids.
Mm-hmm.
And others, for various reasons, had no interest in ideas or producing anything that I could see. I probably didn't see a lot of what was going on. So one story that's as old as the beginning of the library in America is the kid with a fire in his belly who meets his first librarian. And when those things work, the story, the person's life story, how I got to be who I am, has a very prominent place for that librarian. And I've heard these stories. So, is it with the kinds of responsibilities that a person has as a librarian these days? Is there time? Is there space? Is there opportunity for you to work with the kid who really wants to learn everything the library has to teach, from Tolstoy to computer design to music composition to the genealogy and the rare books?
Well, I don't think that there's, I don't want to say that there isn't time for that. I think that what the library is especially good at is making those connections and helping people find a path to what they want to learn or what they want to explore. So different than an educator or a teacher in a school setting or academic setting, I think we see our roles more as being a guide and connector to try to not teach all of those things, but to help the individual find what they're looking for, or find find a path to where they're trying to get to. So that might be working with a community partner on jobs, and we can provide workshops, and then they can get connected to more robust services through a career counselor for that sort of thing, or the work we were doing with community members as volunteers coming in as mentors. That was one of the motivations for that, is that the volunteers can come in and spend 2 hours, 3 hours sitting down with a particular young person, working on a project together, or talking about those things, or how do I get there, or what is graduate school anyway, or what's a good college to study this, or how do I get where you are, right? So we as librarians or as library staff don't always have the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with all of our patrons. We do want to welcome everyone and help them learn how to navigate the wealth of resources we have to offer, or to connect them with someone or a service in the community. So yeah, I think that's a good question. When I was working more directly with youth and as a program coordinator, I had more opportunities to do that. And now as a supervisor or manager, I see my role more as supporting the staff in doing that work, and also in trying to connect with the community to understand better what's already out there, what resources are out there, and to understand how we can connect people in the community with all that this neighborhood has to offer too. I mean, there are amazing, tremendous people in this community that could do that, could spend time with young people and help mentor, or at least provide a step up for these kids. And of course it's not just kids that we're serving, Peter. We're there to serve the whole community, and so I guess maybe our conversation is leaning more towards talking about youth, because that's something I'm passionate about and something that I've spent some years working on. And it's not for lack of caring about adults, but I think it's because I just see tremendous potential in young people, and I also see the way that we don't always don't support them to really bring out their potential. Just like all this conversation about early childhood education, I'm glad that we're talking more and more about that, because I mean the research shows that the kids that are read to and sung to and spoken to and develop a vocabulary by the time that they enter kindergarten, versus those that haven't had as much support or as many opportunities, those differences just continue to cascade over a lifetime, and these kids just are not in a position to catch up, and so we're just kind of perpetuating this inequity. And so how do we overcome that? I never pretended I could do that alone, but I think the library has a role to play in that. But we also recognize that we're part of a large community, and there are needs and resources all around.
Right. Well, you might have, I'm just guessing from age, as many years in front of you in your career as you have behind you.
Oh, how kind of you to say.
And you're running a library.
Mm-hmm,
It might turn out in the next while that you're running a larger library, or even that you have something to say about library policy over a fairly broad area.
mm.
So where are the areas of growth and challenge and opportunity as you see them for library services? And we've limited our conversation so far to youth because that just came up. But what beyond let's do the best service we can for everybody at every respect, which is of course the first answer to give always. What would you like to work on in the the second half of your career when you have a little bit of power, a little bit of ability to say over time, I want the building project to go this way and not that way. I want some resources allocated for this and maybe less for that. What kind of concentrations do you foresee?
That's a great question. I hope that, and I do, within Hennepin County, really have had the opportunity to provide some input in terms of direction for our programming and our service. I think for the future, thinking about the future of libraries, I believe strongly in libraries and that they're going to be just as relevant in the future as they are today and have been in the past. I think they're critical for an informed democracy, and I think they're part of what we as a community need to do together thinking about the current environment, with discussion of fake news and what all that means, and literacy, and just being an informed citizen. Libraries are critically important for that purpose alone. But I also think, in addition to books, of course everyone knows libraries have books, and libraries will continue to encourage reading and literacy. But I also think we already do and will have a more important role to play as a community gathering space and as a learning space. And as a space that welcomes all, which is not common, I think, in a lot of society. Where can people gather to meet, to discuss ideas, to learn in a hands-on way that's available to all? So I would like to see libraries continue with their mission to, the library's mission to nourish minds and transform lives. But how we do that, that's going to naturally evolve over time. I think that I'm thinking right now about our community libraries versus some of our larger buildings, which just by the nature of the building and the size, there's some capabilities there for events and activities and programs that not all of our libraries can support. So at very least, I would like libraries to continue to be a place where everyone feels welcome and safe and free to explore what they're interested in exploring. But going beyond that, a place where they can be introduced to new ideas and have opportunities to engage with their neighbors and peers and experts to learn and expand their what they're exposed to. And I think what I love about the library is if you find that thing that sparks an interest, you might, consult source A, and then you get inspired by that and consult source B, and talk to person, and soon people are often running on something that they no longer need someone to spur them. Maybe they just needed something to get them started on that thing that now they can't stop thinking about.
Yeah. sort of, it used to be, it had to be the library. There's no other possibility. Now Wikipedia is sort of the starting place, I think, for really for most people.
Yeah.
And then you go to the library for the book that you sort of found in that first search.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's how I do it anyway.
Right.
If I'm searching with sort of obscure German composers or something, there's it's get the facts from Wikipedia and then see if you're still interested. There's got to be something on Amazon, and if it looks expensive, you check to see if the library has it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right, and the internet certainly has changed everything, and I use the web constantly every day, and I think that's been empowering in so many ways. I don't think that even begins to change the need for libraries. I think that's just been added on to what libraries provide, and another whole range of tools. But that's a big thing too, is just the digital divide that I think a lot of people think, well, that isn't there anymore. Truth be told, so many people struggle with that, and so much of life now is online. There's just a dramatic barrier there for so many people. I mean, just before coming over here, I was helping a gentleman at the library that was trying to fill out an online job application, and just the navigating the window and the mouse and entering the information he needed was a challenge. Well, then when it comes to citizenship, you've got to scan a photo and make sure it's at a certain DPI, and then it has to be just the right dimensions, and people coming in for tax help or all kinds of services that are online now, that has made it more convenient for us in many ways, but has also made it more difficult for others in many ways. And so we provide that access, but also that kind of support and instruction for the average citizen that isn't real savvy with those tools or navigating the web. And so Wikipedia is that's a great resource, but that's a starting point. It's just one piece in a much larger picture, and I hope that the library continues to help fill out that picture, but also we still have a role to play in preserving our collective memory, and I think we have a role to play in just, again, providing those learning opportunities where library staff can spend time assisting someone, but really what we want to do is help them be able to understand that so that they can take what they learned there and build on that, so the next time they feel more equipped to fill out that job application or to submit that document they need to immigration, or to prepare for that test, or any number of things. And then the work we were talking about with the tech center, and the work that I've had the privilege to do with youth, really they're thinking about how we can extend the learning day, not to replace school, but to augment it, and to do that in a way that's appealing and engaging, not as an academic sort of thing, but as you're interested in this, come in and spend time doing that and learn in the process. And I think that the library can continue to do more that way.
We're sitting now in what's become my favorite bookstore in Minneapolis, not because it's the largest, but because it reminds me so much of the library of my youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I gather it has between 20 and 24,000 books in the total shelf space,
Mm-hmm.
which feels to me about right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I grew up in a library, it was probably a bit larger than that, but not a lot larger. It feels about right for a library to be about that size.
Okay.
And I wonder, now there are lots of places in Minnesota and lots of communities in Minneapolis that don't have a library because the scale of a library, the idea of what a library is it's got to be bigger than that or it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so in many little communities, 800 people or something, there isn't a library anymore. There's a regional library somewhere way the heck, but it's kind of a distance to get to. Have you thought at all about the prospects for small libraries? For you're in a relatively small corner of the Hennepin County Library system, but I expect you got a lot more than 24,000 volumes.
More, yeah. I think we have about 60,000 at Northeast Library, yeah.
Well, for neighborhood libraries without all the bells and whistles, but without an obligation to buy everything that's highly rated on choice, but still, comforting, small, manageable places. Have you thought about how that fits into the system?
Well, I don't know if this answers your question, but I started my library work in a community library, neighborhood library up in North Minneapolis. But I've also worked in larger buildings like Minneapolis Central Library that has, I think, about 3 million items. So that's a much larger collection, much bigger building. And now, of course, I'm at the Northeast Library. I've worked at many community libraries, in fact, all of them in Minneapolis. And it's been really neat to see how the community libraries have a lot in common, but also the interesting differences, neighborhoods, and just the way the library functions in those neighborhoods. When in North Minneapolis, after school, the kids from Jordan Park come by, the senior center up the street. We see, people walking into the library, into their neighborhood library, and I think the neighborhood community libraries have a different feel because of that, whereas Minneapolis Central or the Ridgedale or the Dales are more of a destination library, and they have more robust collection, but they don't necessarily have that same neighborhood feel. So I think our community libraries are so important because of the role they play in those neighborhoods, the kinds of relationships that are built, the kinds of community meetings, the kinds of connections that happen there. After story time, parents are visiting with each other and talking about their children and talking about books and reading and homework help for teens after school, or senior surf day where volunteers come in and help seniors in the neighborhood. So I think that the community libraries, smaller libraries like you say, still have an important role to play, and that I think we have a good mix of large destination libraries and those libraries that are situated where people live. I guess I have to think about that more in the future of community libraries, especially in those very small communities you mentioned that may not be able to continue to support a library. I would love to see every community have their library.
Once upon a time I hatched an idea. I'm sure it has everything wrong with it, but when a bookstore like this one buys an individual's collection, they they pick up a few things that are valuable. And there's maybe 5,000 volumes, which are in everybody's collection, and they're not worth very much. I mean, that 5,000 volumes is just a burden. It's more work to sell it than you'll ever get. It really needs to be pulped, or it needs to be the core of a neighborhood library, because the books that everybody has who's lived 60 years are also the books that everybody wants to read at some point. Catcher in the Rye, Catch-22, Huckleberry Finn, Anna Karenina, and sooner or later the books will die because they aren't very good editions. They aren't library editions. So I've always wondered if there was a way that in this incredible number of people who are dying now, who are downsizing and leaving serious book collections. If that instead of those collections being constantly dispersed at enormous cost, they could be passed on. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if there's enough heart to make it happen, but when I think of what it costs to take one book, however trivial, and turn it into a book on the shelf, I begin, thinking about some way of simplifying that whole process.
Yeah, and wow, gosh, the Friends of Northeast Library, great group of library advocates. They do a story time, not story time, but a book sale twice a year, and we get donations from community members, like you say, maybe a collection from someone who's downsizing, and then they sell those to raise funds for library programs and events at the library. And oftentimes people will ask, I'd like to donate this volume or these volumes to the library, can you add them to the collection? And as much as we would like to do that, there is a lot of back-end work that is done to make a book accessible, and so they almost always will do that with a new clean copy, because there's the cataloging work that goes into it, the barcoding, the putting the RFID tag on the item, and all of the metadata stuff behind there. And so even though we might get a really well cared for copy of Anna Karenina, if it's aging, or it's not on acid-free paper, or if it's anything that isn't going to be preservable, or just doesn't make sense to do all that work to make it accessible through the library catalog, we can't do that. So instead, that fundraising with the book sales allows us to do other things to enhance library service. But yeah, I know what you mean. These great collections and what can be done. But that's, again, one of the things I love about the library. I used to be a book collector, Peter, and I had carried my book collection with me to various, in fact, up here in Northeast, I lived on 8th and Main and then 15th and Adams, and every time I'd move, I'd have to move, I don't know how many boxes of books, and I still love books. But being a librarian or having access to the library, I don't find the need to continue to collect like that, because I have any title I want sort of at my fingertips. E-books too are changing things, and but I still prefer to read a print book. I'm a big fan of technology and a big technology user. I think I'm pretty savvy with tech, but I still prefer a print book for reading, especially when it comes to fiction or a nice nonfiction volume. I'll read articles and newspaper online, but I still prefer sitting down with a print book. It's still good technology, and you can take it to the beach or the bathtub, and well, I shouldn't say that. I'm a librarian. Don't take your book in the bathtub.